Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. It's our final day in the Glacier Peak Wilderness. Don't cry. I feel like when I woke up this morning, my biggest memory is that I was very cold. We were supposed to be having kind of like that early morning start because we didn't want the glacier to be softening up as we traveled over it. And you know what? We were up early because I was eating breakfast in bed by 5:50. So that's actually pretty good.
And I'm pretty sure that our alarm went off a couple times and it was just so cold that morning in the basin. So I'm pretty sure I snoozed it because the night before we had told the dad and the boys that we were
we had not directly talked to them yet. They had overheard. Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
And so, I mean, they had overheard us talking about how we were going to get an early start. So I think that our goal was to get up at 5 a.m. Yeah. And then it was just so cold. I lacked the willpower to actually get up. So, so finally, we did wake up, and then we typically don't eat in our tent. We try to just keep our food very separate from our tent, but we'd already kind of defiled our tent by eating the Skittles in it earlier. So maybe it already smelled of Skittles. So it was our last morning anyway. So we did eat in our tent, like sitting in our sleeping bags, because that's how chilly we were. No clue what temperature it was, but I think it was probably hovering around freezing.
Yeah, I'd say it was pretty close to freezing. And one thing that actually kind of stands out to me about this day is I wore long sleeves. I wore my sleeping shirt for hiking, which...
So did I.
Which means it's cold. When we're wearing long sleeves, it's very cold because we are short sleeves and shorts girls. And I did...
Really tank tops and shorts girls.
I did still wear shorts, but I had to also have the long sleeve on. So before we were going to leave, obviously we had to pack up camp and we had to, go visit the toilet, which was not as scenic as the one from the day before. But when we were pretty close to being done getting like all packed up with camp, you're kind of thinking, okay, it's time to go. I wish I was going faster. Gotta get going. And then I see my best friend, the dog, and it's at kind of like the top of the hill because I think it must have gone with its human to the bathroom or whatever. And I see it and it starts running down the hill to greet me. And I was like, obviously happy to see it, but also in my mind, I kind of didn't want to pet it because I knew that when I petted it, my hands would just smell like the natural like bug repellent. And we only had exactly one wipe left. So I knew I couldn't use it because that was for if we needed to go to the bathroom again. And so I was like...
And you're talking like a hand sanitizing wipe.
Yeah, like a hand sanitizing wipe. Yes. Anyway, so we only had one left, so I didn't want to waste it on just getting that off. But it was like running towards me, so I kind of didn't really want to pet it. And it was like beeline for me for sure. And honestly, it like came down that hill super fast and it ran to me and it jumped and it hit me in the mouth with its mouth and I heard the crunch immediately and I was just like, oh my goodness, my worst nightmare has come true.
You went mouth to mouth with the dog, and whose tooth crunched? Yours or the dog's?
Certainly mine. That dog mouth is a very hard mouth, I'll tell you right now. It is bony. And I felt the crunch and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to open my mouth and it's going to just be like a dangling tooth. And I think I was a little hysterical maybe. I feel like I was freaking out and I was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Because you probably thought I broke my jaw or something. And I was like, how bad is it? Showing her my tooth. And it was fortunately not broken from the root, which was my imagination. It did chip off the bottom part of my tooth, which I got fixed by the dentist after I was done, which she thought the story was kind of comical. Mm-hmm. And surprisingly, actually, a lot of people get their teeth broken by dogs, but
it wasn't Carrie's first dental scare. This was her backcountry dental emergency in quotation marks. But a year prior, Carrie had been playing with our nephew. And what happened?
He ran down the hill and I was bending over to pick up our niece and he hit my jaw with his head so hard it popped it out of the socket or something and it crunched. So I had
but then you could still open and close your mouth, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I do not like stuff happening with my teeth, as crazy as that sounds. But so then I remember it was kind of funny because I was both super thankful and also pretty horrified. And the owner was like, she didn't mean to. I'm like, I know the dog did not mean to, but that really doesn't actually help me in the moment. Which then the dentist also was like, well, the good news is your tooth will probably live, but it could also die. And I was like, what? but it's still alive right now, guys. So that's good. So that was kind of my excitement for the morning, and I'll blame that on why we didn't leave camp until like 7:10ish. Although that probably didn't add that much time to our day. So we were finally ready to head out, and a little bit before we left, like maybe 15, I don't know, maybe half an hour before that, Dad with his 2 boys headed out, which we were kind of like, oh, nice. Now we'll have someone to follow. And I do remember as we were heading up towards the pass, there were so many huge, just like slabs of granite laying around. And I always kind of think like, man, if I could just pick this up and carry it home, I could have the most beautiful counter. But leave no trace. I don't take the slabs of granite home from the wilderness.
Let alone that they must weigh a half ton. Yeah. But I too, like if Carrie and I could carry together one massive slab of granite out, we definitely would. But we are not quite strong enough.
Yeah, and we also do respect leave no trace enough that we probably actually definitely wouldn't. Yeah. But it would be a great story for your counter. Anyway, so we started heading up the pass, and I mean, I think I was just like pretty nervous, but just gonna do it at this point, you know? And it was kind of cool. At first it was just rocks, which was fine, especially when you're scrambling upwards. Like, you know, it's a lot easier to scramble uphill on loose rock. And then you get to this section where you realize you're on the glacier. And it was kind of cool because you could actually see the rock suspended in the ice. And I feel like that was the first time I truly understood how glacial flour or glacial silt, which gives the color to glacial lakes, I've really understood how that could be made, how those rocks could be ground down, like with the freeze-thaw cycle and as the glacier flows. And it was just so cool to be on there.
And I'd say, like, the other glaciers that we've stood on since this point, which this is the Lyman Glacier, correct? I've never seen the amount of rocks suspended in it. So I'm guessing it's just because this was, like, it was bare glacial ice. But we've been on bare glacial ice too that doesn't have rocks suspended in it. But I think it was also just in the area where, like, I don't think the glacier was very thick. I think that it was fairly thin because this glacier is receding and, like, probably in another couple of years might not even be categorized as one. But so it was really fascinating, this particular glacier, because as Carrie mentioned, there are just thousands of rock particles suspended in the ice. And it was wild because the smell of the glacier it smelled like a lake. And it just kind of reminded me of this smell like you would smell swimming in a lake. And, you know, the glacier is obviously actively melting. And it was just like, wow, this is like a lake from like 1,000 years ago or however many years ago. You're capturing this smell from back in time and you're smelling it again, which was wild. And as Carrie mentioned, just like that visualization of how, like, there were rocks in the glacier that were larger and you could see how they were being carried down by the glacier over time, as well as then being broken up into smaller fragments as the rocks got buried in the layers. And then it's so fascinating because so much of the terrain that we hike over has been shaped by glaciers, even if there are no more glaciers there. And so it's even fascinating to just see how the different types of, like, talus and scree and just, like, the sizes of rocks are influenced by the glacier that was once at work there. So super fascinating. Looking back at some of my pictures and videos, I, like, definitely, you know, we were put on our micro spikes, so we had some traction. The ice was really hard. It was very firm and solid at that point in the morning. And so we're just, like, looking around, and I, like, literally am taking pictures of, like, crevasses, and these openings are maybe 6 or 12 inches, like, in width, and I don't know how deep they go. I'm sure there are larger ones somewhere, and I think it was just, like, I don't know. People don't rope up for this. I've never read about anyone doing that, but a little bit of naiveness on our part, just because, I don't know, it's like we were just there and we're like, oh my gosh, I thought, wow, if I dropped my phone in that crack in the ice, I wouldn't be able to get it back. And I think I even thought, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to fall in that. So thus the concept of traveling on a rope team makes a lot of sense. And that's, like, our first introduction really to glaciers, was just the exit point of this hike that many people do.
And honestly, even to go back to the geology of the area, I remember the night before that basin, the Lyman Lake, Upper Lyman Lake Basin, is just like filled with rocks and there's rock piles everywhere. And I remember we were like, I feel like you'd have to have an excavator to scoop this pile of rocks here. How does that happen? So it's interesting to like see how the glacier can carry and deposit things in different locations. And not only that, but also just like how there will be huge boulders sometimes that you'll see in a basin and you'll be like, where did that boulder come from? Like, I used to think, oh, did it like break off of, you know, the cliff and roll down there? But there's actually these things called glacial erratics, which are large boulders that are carried along in a glacier until they're just deposited in the one spot where they are. And so that's actually something that you can always be looking for whenever you're hiking in a glacially shaped or formed area, is a glacial erratic, because they're pretty common to see.
And what's the name of that Instagram account? There was IG geographers or something. I don't know. We'll have to look it up because it was been such a cool account for us to look at and just like learn about different geologic information. The other thing I'll say about the basin though is when you're looking at the glacier, like the route that we took to leave, you don't see a ton of glacier or snow. A lot of it is rock. But once we were up there, we realized that a lot of what looked like it was rock was actually a thin layer of rocks covering an active glacier below. So that was even interesting to us as well, that sometimes the glacier is like beneath a layer of rock versus just being something that you can see. So the Lyman Basin was just really fascinating to observe all those things.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that was kind of interesting is when we first stepped onto the glacier, I feel like we at first didn't even realize we were there because we were just on rocks. Then we realized we were on top of rocks frozen in the glacier. But there was like this patch of snow that I think we thought about starting to head up. And then before, like as we were putting our spikes on, kind of realized it was actually better for us to continue on the glacier because then you could kind of control where you were traveling in relation to the crevasses, which again, didn't seem to be massive, but because I think it's considered to be a pretty mild glacier, you know, so I don't think it has like really deep or intense crevasses, but I also don't know. But it was like kind of that consideration of like, we could go on the snowfield because that seems like more comfortable to us. Like we can see that it's all just continuous snow travel, but like also having the thought process of, well, if I like slide off of the snowfield and then I'd have to try to control my fall versus like you can actually navigate the way you want to go around them. So when we got to the top, the dad and his sons were all just kind of hanging out there because the top of the pass, again, we love passes, right? Because it takes you from one segment to the next and it's like entering another world and exiting the one that you've been in. And so they were just really taking in the view, which is so beautiful, of the Lyman Lakes. And then also when you look at kind of the Phelps Creek area. But it was funny because we got to visiting with him and he told us that they actually had been waiting for us to go first because they were like, you guys seem to know what you were doing. So we wanted to follow you. And I don't know, it's just kind of a reminder that sometimes you always feel like everyone knows more than you because we were like happy to follow them because we felt like they knew more than us. The blind leading the blind. Uh-huh. And another funny conversation.
And both making it to the top.
Yeah, they've all made it. But it was funny because another conversation that we had up there, we had mentioned we've been out for 7 days and he just looked so shocked. And he said, so it took you 7 days to do 30 miles? Uh-huh. Because he didn't realize there were other ways that you could connect other than I think they did like Buck Creek Pass to Spider Gap, which is a pretty common loop. And I'm sure well worth doing there. I would do it if I had like a couple days to kill. But that was just kind of funny because I feel like he was so confused when we said it took us 7 days and then really impressed. And we were like, well, we went 90 miles, so we couldn't really have done it too much faster. But after we kind of took in the views and enjoyed everything that we got to see up there, we decided to say goodbye to the Lyman Lakes Basin and head down the Spider Glacier, which is kind of more like a permanent snowfield, to be quite honest. I don't know if it has crevasses or anything, but yeah, that I felt was pretty easy to navigate. It was steep, but it wasn't too steep. We were just able to take our time and step down. I feel like we're having a really good time because we'd crossed the other glacier, which had been kind of a stressful like question mark.
And it was nice because this was on the south side, so it has been getting full sun like all morning long. And at this point, it was like, I don't know if it was like 9 a.m. or something. And so we could have had our first exposure of like plunge stepping without even knowing it, which is a technique that you would use to descend like a glacier or snowfield when the snow softens up a little. It allows you to be a little faster and balanced. But yeah, we put our micro spikes back on, and then just leapt onto the snowfield to descend from Spider Gap, and we made some great time. I feel like it was like a little bit of a combo of like just aiming for the right. It looked like a sun cup, even though I swear, Carrie, you told me there are no sun cups in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, so I think there probably are, but I read just like 2 days ago someone say that we don't get like true sun cups, because honestly I feel like they were like 1 inch deep versus like sometimes in the Sierra I feel like they'll be like a foot deep of sun cups. So I feel like it's like baby sun cups.
Yeah. So you like kind of planted your foot on the baby sun cups to give you just a little bit of like a baby sun cups to give yourself a little bit of like a decent purchase. And then that was just a fun section because I felt like we just kind of flew down it, and there were like all these other people that were descending as well. I don't know where there were like 2 or 3 other groups that we maybe caught up to. I don't really know. Or maybe they were going up.
Okay. They were going up. One thing that I do remember is this was kind of our first exposure to a little moat, which would be kind of that area where the rocks radiate heat and cause there to be separation between the rock and the snowfield that you have to kind of step over. I feel like when we were exiting the glacier, we had to kind of think about where we wanted to go, because there were some areas that had like a little bit moat on the edge. But then fortunately, it's like you could literally just follow the shape of the glacier and turn and walk off of the tongue, so to speak, of the glacier and onto dry land. And then once we were at the top part, it was pretty much relatively cruisy. There is kind of a steep part with a little bit of exposure, but I feel like we'd just been out there so long and we'd overcome so many things. I wasn't even thinking about that anymore. So we just literally cruised our way down to Phelps Creek Meadows.
Which descending there, it was just so beautiful because you got to see, I mean, it's like a pretty like very distinct valley with steep sides on either side, and it's like the Cascades look of just like the green layer of, you know, grassy meadow that goes up into trees, and then the top is the rocky edges. And so it was so beautiful. And I remember thinking as we descended into the meadow, like, wow, this would make a beautiful day hike. But based on everything that I've seen in the last 7 days, like this site feels less than incredible to me, which was mind-blowing just because it's such an absolutely gorgeous area. So picking our way down into the meadow was pretty steep with multiple switchbacks, and it was getting warm, but it was really awesome because it was like every time you stopped, you needed to like take a picture or just really soak in the views because it was that beautiful. And that's one of the things about, you know, coming down from either a pass or a peak. Obviously you enter new terrain, but you kind of lose that higher up perspective. And there's this part of you that wishes you could stay up higher for longer because of just the beauty of what you're able to see. But also reality says that you have to keep moving. You can't live on a pass or a peak. And so you have to enter that new terrain.
And one thing that is interesting about this area is there's a couple of the top 100 tallest mountains in Washington. It's called like the Bulger list or Bulger list. I don't know how they pronounce it, but that's the list of the top 100 mountains like in terms of height in Washington. And I think like Mount Maud is there, and Seven Finger Jack I want to stay. So there's really tall mountains around you. Like you truly are in a basin. And so there is still that really cool aspect of being in that glacially carved area. But we were not ones that were that interested in soaking it in because you know what? This was the longest trip we'd ever done in the wilderness. We were ready to get back to our car. So we honestly just turned on the jets and we were cruising. I mean, honestly, I have a video where Molly's like taking a little video of her watch as we walk, and we were doing like 4.5 miles per hour at some points, but like consistently for about 3 miles, we were going about 15-minute miles or so. And so that will tell you just how badly we were ready to go out of there. Even though it had been beautiful and wonderful, there is still the draw of civilization and returning to it. And I think it was even a little bit uphill also. So it's like we were going uphill and we were just cruising. Yeah. But you know what? Our packs were the lightest they'd been. I feel like in terms of mentally and emotionally, in terms of like worries, I was the lightest I'd been. Yeah. And we had met cool people. We'd seen like amazing sights. We'd been on this whole journey and it was coming to a close. And while we were so grateful for the time that we were out there, we also had to work the next day. I'm pretty sure Molly had to work the next morning and I had to work the next night.
That's incredible. We really just like put everything in we like jam-packed our itineraries, which is amazing. I just have to highlight when you were talking about like as we were like race walking to the trailhead, which I don't feel like we were excited to get to the car and to eat a meal and like
I wanted to put on different clothes.
Wear a different outfit. But I also feel like part of the factor behind us like going so fast is I just felt so powerful. Like thinking about prior to starting our journey, you know, you laying in the car, like thinking about how could this work, and like when we were being shuttled from the Jeep to the other trailhead to start our hike, being like, wow, we are without a vehicle and our like most relevant option is to now walk 90 miles back to our car through some of the most like remote and rugged trails in Washington, specific to the Pacific Crest Trail. And so then you've actually accomplished that. Like all those fears that you had, all the things that you were imagining that could go wrong didn't, and some things happened that were hard, right? Like we couldn't see anything other than a cloud for 2 days. Carrie almost fell into the river. Well, she did fall into the Kennedy Creek, but she didn't get swept away. I had a very large bruise / bloody scab on my shin from the boulder rolling across it, but it was just like, wow, we made it and we were strong enough to have accomplished this, and we were blessed to have safety with this trip. And so it's just kind of fun to remember that feeling and know that we can each experience that in our own lives, whether it's in our outdoor adventures or even things that we're taking on in our daily lives.
So we actually made it to the trailhead right about noon, which it's funny because we actually only walked for like 4-ish hours.
Well, a large chunk. It took us a long time to navigate the Lyman Glacier and like that steep snow slope up. And once we got to the pass and headed down, I feel like we were going at a good speed, but it just took time to navigate.
Well, really, I was saying we got up at like 5, but I think, a lot happened between 5 and the time we left. But we finally got to our car. I mean, what an exhilarating, fun part of the trip is just getting back to your car. You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden, all the little comforts of civilization just start like pouring back in, and your car is still there, and all your tires are full of air, and all your items are there. Like that's exciting. No bear has like torn into your vehicle, and you're just like grateful for air conditioning. You're grateful for pants that don't smell like they're from 5 to 7 days ago. Like you're grateful to just have different things that you can put on. And so we put everything on, but we also were trying to be pretty quick about it. I think this is a drive where we learned that we should always have a car snack option in the car for the drive, because we did not. And we were kind of like, what were we thinking?
Which we did have clothes to change into, right?
Yeah. Because we learned after the whole Rachel going to the emergency department debacle that you should definitely commit to having extra clothes if you're going to drive more than like 1 hour home. You do not want to be sitting like in your 7-day-old outfit for that much time. But it was, I think we've kind of touched on this in a different podcast that we did, but this was the time where we got back to the car, flipped on the radio, and it's like you've been so isolated for a week from any outside news. And it was something about like Afghanistan has fallen. And we were kind of like, what? We like when we went into the wilderness, it was kind of just the status quo, like nothing was really happening there. And then it's like you come out and this major historical event has happened and you kind of just miss the whole thing. So then you're kind of like trying to play catch up after that. You're just so confused. So yeah, we kind of just started barreling back down towards Leavenworth and
taking it slow initially because the trail on the road up to Phelps Creek, Carrie mentioned right when she was feeling gaggy in the van, like there were like so many, it was like washboardy. So like you are ready to get back, but you have to like creep along this like very bumpy road until finally you get to a point where you can actually drive the speed limit.
Well, when I say barrel, I mean going faster than 4.5 miles an hour, which was the top speed that our bodies had gone for the past week. So everything feels pretty fast at that point.
And I gotta say, I was pretty proud of myself because I hadn't made any purchases for a whole 7 days. So time to really go wild. And I think that we decided like we could either go through Seattle and down I-5, or it was like just a slight bit longer, but also less traffic if we went through Leavenworth and then like down through Yakima to go back to Salem. And so we were like, well, let's just go through Leavenworth. Like we like that town. We end up going there like every year when we do the enchantments through hike. And then, we just explore a little. And so as we were driving there, we were like, oh, what do we want? And I think at first I wanted a burger.
Yeah. So Molly wanted a burger and I wanted pizza. And we were kind of at an impasse because we had to keep driving because Molly needed to go to bed. Like it's probably, I guess it was like noon, but by the time you get in the car, it's probably like 1 or 1:30. And then, you got your whole drive back at 6 hours. Yeah. And so you still need a shower, and I was going to need to brush my hair and hopefully not have to get my scissors out. And so we were in a hurry to just stay on the road. We needed to be able to eat in the car.
And so, of course, we don't even have much service. So Carrie's like trying to find different restaurants. And I think we found one that had a burger and pizza maybe. And we looked and it didn't open until like 4 p.m. And we were going to be in Leavenworth, say at like 2:30. So she's like looking and looking at all the options.
And then I find a magical place that combines the deliciousness of pizza with the travelability, I know that's not the right word, of a hamburger. They made calzones. And
what was the place called?
Rudloof's Pizza, baby. So
Rudloof's Pizza und Brats.
Yeah, und Brats. And I was kind of like, let's just take a risk on it. People say it's really good. I could order from my phone. Yes. Did I call them or order online? I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
I feel like you called them to just like double check that like they were open. And then I don't think Maybe I'd had a calzone at some point in my life, but not really one that I could remember. And Carrie was looking at the ingredients list, and like, I feel like you maybe had a question about ingredients or like how many toppings you could put into the calzone. And so in Leavenworth, if anyone knows, I'm not sure, it's like a Bavarian village. So it's very much a themed town. It's pretty cool. And we've been to a couple other restaurants there before and like tried the different brats and things, but we'd never been to Rudloof's. So Carrie put in the order for the calzones, and it was amazing because I think it was like 40-minute drive to Rudloof's, and it was gonna be ready in 40 minutes. And we were just like, oh my gosh, we are gonna have like a hot meal that is not from a bag in 40 minutes.
Yeah, so that was pretty exciting. We picked them up, literally the best calzone I've ever had in my life. And the thing is, you'd say, well, that's just because you didn't get out of the wilderness for so many days. No, we've gone back there repeatedly, like probably 5 times, I'd say, hopefully now. Every time we're passing through the area, if it's possible, we go to Rudloof's because it's so good. And we also did you talk about the pretzel? No. Oh, they also...
Tell them about the pretzel, Carrie.
Obviously, they have a pretzel because it's a little German, German town. So they have a delicious pretzel with cheese dip that we also get. Oh my gosh, I'm telling you, there's literally nothing better after a hike, whether it was for 1 day or 7 days. I wish I was sponsored by Rudloof's. But this is not. This is all just, we literally love them so much.
And one of my few regrets in the last year is that we actually went to Rudloof's. I don't remember when it was, but it was last year in August or something. And we weren't quite hungry enough to buy the pretzel. We just got the calzones. And I feel like I've spent, every waking moment thinking about my regrets of not purchasing that pretzel. So I'm very excited to right those wrongs, hopefully in the next 5-ish weeks. We're definitely going to go there. So super exciting. If you guys are ever hiking in that area, try Rudloof's and their calzones. Let us know what you think. And definitely get the pretzel with the beer cheese dip as well. So we picked that up, and then I think we stopped somewhere else to just like pile up on Gatorades. And did we know about the ice cream sandwiches yet, or is that a different time?
They did not have the ice cream sandwiches we wanted at the place we got the Gatorade. So I was actually remembering the Ruby Jewel ice cream sandwiches, also wonderful for after a hike. They did have them, however. We stopped at the gas station in like Hood River, wherever you cross. It's not Hood River. It's the Dalles, maybe. Yeah. They had it at the gas station. I went in, I got us a couple of those.
Which we have the claim to fame of having gone to the actual brick and mortar Ruby Jewel in Portland when it was not just like something you'd buy in a grocery store or a gas station, where they'd actually scoop the ice cream onto the cookies and sandwich it in. But yeah, anytime we can grab Ruby Jewel after a hike, we're also very happy. And I'll mention that we decided that we needed to keep going. So I think that we got our calzones and we just got back in the car and kept driving. And it was crazy because they cut the calzone in 2 pieces. I demolished the first half and then proceeded to have just like this huge stomach ache. and I couldn't even eat the other half. I actually saved it for my lunch the next day, which was amazing. But it was wild because I think that I don't know if this happened on the John Muir Trail, but I swear that my stomach shrunk a little bit to like accommodate just my change in diet. Like my calories were reduced on that trip compared to like my typical diet. How can you keep that up, especially on a first long trip where there were a lot of learning curves for us? But yeah, it was kind of hard to eat a typical serving of food because my body was like, whoa, we don't know what to do with all this stuff.
Yep. But eventually we made it home. We had our showers and I was able to brush my hair repeatedly for like a long time and just put more and more conditioner in it. And I did get all of my gnarls out. Obviously, a lot of hair came out too. But you know what? You do what you can do. And this is one thing that I don't think I've mentioned about this trip. One of my great woes of this trip was this is the first trip where I was really deeply affected by the shorts that I wore in terms of thigh chafing. And this, I'm just going to say this. I remember it being kind of funny at the end because I like when you chafe something, this was before we had Body Glide, or we had like one moleskin in our emergency pack. So we weren't going to use it. I kid you not. I think I like chafed my thighs concave because like that skin was gone. It was so chafed. And so that was when I learned that we should always have body armor also with us because body armor. Body Glide, the anti-chafing thing with you in case you start chafing unexpectedly and you have nothing that you can do about it except for just keep on keeping on. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. We really enjoyed reliving our time in the Glacier Peak Wilderness, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Honestly, I feel like it helps me to sometimes go over how anxious I was about those things because now it's something that's kind of second nature to me. And I don't think that I feel we even have a trip planned along a similar vein this summer, but with a little bit more complexity to it. And I don't really feel anxious about that. So I think it's nice to sometimes reflect on where you are and where you've come from versus sometimes reflecting on where you are and where you want to be.
Or even just forgetting where you came from and just thinking that it was always easy and now it's hard, but being like, wow, it was actually really challenging, but I'm also learning and growing. And then it's exciting to see what you're capable of and also what your mind is capable of.
So anyway, we hope that you'll join us next week for our next episode. Possibly we'll be talking about some 1 to 2 night backpacking trips that we went on. But if you'd like to see any pictures or videos from this last day, we looked so happy when we got to the car. Don't you want to see that? You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Bye.